Hey, what's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken, and welcome back to another video. Buck is one of the best champions in the game for curb stomping matches. He's ridiculously fun and can be very potent with the right setup. So in this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to play Buck like a pro, and if you guys have been enjoying these guides, then make sure, of course, to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more videos in the future. With all that being said, let's get straight into the video.
'Tis the season!
So real quick before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I want to quickly go over what each of Buck's abilities do so we're all on the same page. His primary fire is a shotgun that deals 700 damage up close, and of course because it is a shotgun, it has a random spread of pellets each time you shoot it, so there is a little bit of randomness involved, and it'll be most consistent up close and personal, which is where Buck likes to be. At longer ranges like this, he both has a drastic fall-off curve, and also fewer of the pellets will be hitting the target, meaning you'll get a fairly random spread of damage, but he can still poke enemies relatively consistently even at a sort of medium range. Buck also reloads each shot individually, meaning it'll take a very long time to reload from empty. However, if you just fire one pellet and then reload, it'll be a relatively quick reload. And also, if you fire out a few pellets and then you try and reload, but then interrupt the reload by shooting, you'll actually be able to shoot out that pellet that you just reloaded, and it'll basically cancel the reload. So that's very important. If you run low on ammo in a tight situation, you don't have to reload from full. You can just load in a couple of pellets and then get back to shooting the enemy that's on your tail. The net shot is his next ability, and it's a very simple projectile that does have some travel time, and when it hits the target, it'll deal 200 damage, and it'll slow the enemy for a few seconds. This is very helpful for locking down a kill, and also the 200 damage can be very impactful for securing kills. It can breach certain kill thresholds and make it so that you get a kill when you otherwise wouldn't. So, very important ability. After that, we have the Heroic Leap, and this is just a big jump like this. That'll help you close the distance quickly on a target, and yeah, it also has quite a lot of air control to it, so you can really finely maneuver it, and you can even do like full turns in the air like this. So yeah, very important to get used to handling it, but it is a very simple ability. Then we have his Recovery. This is an ability that heals him for 1,000 health over 1 second, and you can't do anything else while using Recovery, nor can you cancel the ability. So ideally, you want to do this in between fights, or if you catch a break behind cover when you're not affected by Cauterize, kind of like this. Finally, his ultimate. This will instantly reload him and give him infinite ammo and a faster fire rate for a short time, very similar to Tyra's ultimate. And when the ultimate is over, you retain all that ammo, so you can use it to reload in the middle of a fight like that very quickly and just get the kill on somebody. It's useful for getting 1 or 2 kills, but that's about it. So as you can see, Buck has a very simple base kit, but where things really start to get interesting are when you take a look at his talents and loadouts. So let's go over each of his talents now. His most popular talent by far is called Bounce House, which causes Heroic Leap to deal 600 damage and apply a knock-up to enemies within 20 units of your landing location. This talent allows him to burst enemies incredibly quickly. You can just jump on them, dealing 600 damage like this and knocking them up, which is a very powerful form of crowd control, and that knock-up will also interrupt certain channeled movement abilities like Ceres' Shadow Travel during the cast animation, or Ash's Shoulder Bash. So very powerful ability, and you can basically just shoot, boom, boom, shoot, and that shot like that in order to kill someone very, very quickly. Buck's next talent is Bulk Up, and this causes Recovery to instantly heal you for 400 and increase your maximum health by 300 for 5 seconds. This is a very good talent to pick if you do not trust your healer in the slightest, because it provides Buck a major boon to his self-sustain. So, pick the talent, get shot by Cassie a little bit, and you can see, get a burst of 400, still get the 1,000 healing, and then I'm up to 2,600 HP, making Buck a very beefy boy. And with the right build, you can become incredibly tough to kill. Finally, we have Ensnare, and this is a talent that does quite a lot of things. It increases the damage you deal to targets slowed by net shot by 20% and increases the duration of net shot slow by half a second. The damage increase will last a minimum of 2 seconds. So this talent allows Buck to get generally superior consistent damage over time versus beefy targets like tanks, especially with the right build, and it'll also give Buck a little bit better mid-ranged poke, because of course you get the net shot, and then you're doing more damage with the shotgun at these medium ranges. It can also increase certain kill thresholds, and it's generally a more reserved form of playing Buck, but certainly a powerful one. Now let's talk about Buck's loadouts, and this is where Buck arguably gets the most of his strength from, because while his talents are certainly good, his cards are just on a whole other level, and he has so many good cards that there are really a lot of ways ways you can build this champion, and there are certainly meta builds, but there are also very fun, very viable builds that I'm going to show you here. First up, we have the quintessential Bounce House build, and this is probably the most popular Buck build there is because it's so gosh darn effective, and it's also really fun. So first of all, we have Stomping Ground at level 5. This is arguably Buck's most powerful card, because it reduces all active cooldowns by a whopping 70% after getting an elimination, which is utterly madness. And what this allows Buck to do is jump in, get a kill, and then jump out, or jump onto another target and basically snowball the enemy team. It is a really powerful card. So check this out. Shoot the Vic, jump on the Vic, and kill him. Boom. And then, just like that, I have another bounce house ready to go. Kill this Victor, wait just a couple seconds, and then jump onto the next Victor. Boom, just like that. Shoot that guy, shoot him again, land on the ground. Oh, guess what? While I'm in the air, it still gives me cooldown reduction. Kill this Victor. Boom, just like that. Shoot this guy, kill this man. Boom, jump again. Yeah, this card is utterly busted, and if you're not using it with a Bounce House playstyle, then you're probably just playing Buck wrong, unless you're using the other weird build I'm going to show you later. This build also features Momentum, which reduces your damage taken by 25% for 4 seconds after using Heroic Leap. This is a fantastic card for keeping Buck alive, especially as he jumps onto the enemy's face. You want that damage reduction when you're up close and personal with the enemy, so that way you're harder to kill, and this card has really good uptime because it has an insane duration, and also if you refresh your Heroic Leap with Stomping Ground, then you can use it just a couple of seconds later to refresh the duration and get somewhat permanent uptime on this card as long as you're snowballing kills properly. So this is a really good card in a Bounce House build. This build also features Leg Day, which increases the jump strength of Heroic Leap. It's a really good card to have to help close the distance on Buck. However, you do want to be careful not to run it too high in your build because sometimes it can send you so high in the air that it actually takes you too long to come back down to the ground, and the enemies will be able to react and get away from where you're trying to land on them with your Bounce House. So yeah, very finicky card, but certainly a very strong one. I also have Vigor to regenerate ammo after activating Recovery, just to help keep the pace in between fights, and then I also have Exhilarate at level 1, so that if I don't get a kill, at least I get a tiny bit of cooldown reduction on Heroic Leap, and it also helps to get my next Heroic Leap back immediately after getting a kill, and keep the snowball rolling. I also have a version of this build that drops Momentum down to level 3 and puts Leg Day up to level 5, and this is for maps that are really big and really hard to navigate with Buck unless you have Leg Day at level 5. So think of maps like Timbermill, or maybe in some cases like a Serpent Beach or something like that. Really big, really tall, really difficult maps for Buck. So yeah, certainly not a build you want to use all the time, but in the right situation, it really helps. Finally, we have the very goofy Bounce House no-kill build. And this is a build where you want to play Bounce House and you want to jump in, do some damage, and get out, but you're not entirely confident that you'll be able to get kills. Let's say you're against Ray, for example. If she pops Envelop, you're not going to be able to kill her to get your reset. This build basically circumvents that by allowing you to guarantee one Heroic Leap reset by comboing Exhilarate and Seismic Wave at level 5. It's a very goofy and very niche build that doesn't get played super often, but it can make Buck more consistent by taking away his need to rely on getting an elimination. It still has Momentum at level 3, and it also has these other cards just for cooldown reduction as level 1 fillers because you're not running with Stomping Ground, and so you don't get cooldown reduction on the net or the recovery either. But check this out. Jump into the sky, land on Victor, and just like that I have a 2.5 second on the leap, and then I can jump again. Now, of course, the problem is this second leap will not get cooldown reset, and that's because Exhilarate has a 5-second internal cooldown. But of course, it does allow me to jump in, shoot, do some damage, boom, just like that, kill this Victor, and then I can jump away to safety. And even if I didn't kill that Victor just then, I'd still be able to jump away and retreat to safety. So, can be a nice build, it's just very niche, and certainly less popular than the other Bounce House build I showcased. Next up, let's talk about bulk up builds. These builds are going to focus on maximizing Buck's tankiness and turning him into a mini juggernaut. So, this first build here is my bulk up tank build, and this features Reconstruction at level 5, which is a really good card for bulk up. This will cut the cooldown of recovery in half, from 10 seconds down to 5 seconds. And if you remember from the description of the talent, bulk up will provide its health bonus for exactly 5 seconds. So you can enter a game loop where you press bulk up, you get your health bonus for 5 seconds, but then, because of reconstructions 5 seconds later, you also get your second recovery. So you press recovery again, getting your health bonus again, and the cycle basically just repeats indefinitely. So this is a really good card for consistent uptime on that health bonus, and also, of course, lots of healing to boot. And then, because we're also reducing the cooldown of recovery so drastically, we're using Deep Breath, which provides 30% damage reduction for 2 seconds after using recovery, allowing you to tank so many different things. It is really good, and with Reconstruction at level 5, this will have very strong uptime, about 40% uptime give or take. And then we also have even more damage reduction from Momentum, so you can still be tanky even after using Heroic Leap. And then we have Vigor and Rapid Sustain as our level 1 fillers. Rapid Sustain provides just a little bit more healing when you're low, and Vigor obviously will be proccing a lot because you have Reconstruction. There's also an alternate version of the build that really focuses on healing if you're just worried about not getting healed at all. So this still has Reconstruction and Deep Breath at level 5 because those are such good cards to use with Bulk Up, but then I drop Momentum for Rapid Sustain, and this will increase your healing received by now 15% while at or below 50% health, so just a little bit more healing. And then I also swapped one of the level 1 filler cards for Bully, which provides a tiny bit of lifesteal after using Net Shot, just to squeeze out as much healing out of the build as physically possible. Finally, let's talk about the Ensnare builds. Up first, we have the Net Speed build, and similar to the Bulk Up builds, this build has Concussion at level 5 to reduce the cooldown of Net Shot by 5 seconds, or in other words, cutting the cooldown in half. Now, you might be wondering, why am I not using Stomping Ground for either the Bulk Up or the Ensnare builds here? And that's because with these two playstyles, I'm really prioritizing consistency over snowball potential. So with Concussion at level 5, I'm able to get a 5-second cooldown on the Net Shot, providing me consistent uptime on these buffs and a consistent damage bonus regardless of whether I kill the enemies or not. When playing Ensnare, I am assuming that I'm going to be going up against targets that I'm not really able to snowball against that well, such as a lot of tanks or a lot of flying characters that I'm not going to be able to jump on with Bulk Up, or otherwise just really difficult targets to kill, and so I want consistent damage that isn't dependent on me getting an elimination. Bounce House is for when you want to snowball, but his other talents are more focused on consistency, survivability, and getting kills through a more nuanced playstyle. So that's why we have Concussion here instead of Stomping Ground at level 5. Then, this build has Gotcha. This is such a fun card, and it provides a lot of utility to the Ensnare playstyle. This will increase your movement speed by a whopping 50% for 3 seconds after using Net Shot. 60% uptime with the card Concussion, really strong, and what this allows you to do is slow down a target, making it so that they can't really chase you that effectively, and then also you are moving 50% faster, so you can run them down, or you can also just escape or reposition them, and you gain survivability through that, but you also gain a superior and different way of securing kills on your targets that is different to how you normally would with a leap-based playstyle. So very fun, very powerful card. I also have Tangled level 3 to increase the duration of Net Shot slow by about a second, and this is just some nice quality of life to improve the consistency overall on Net Shot. And then finally, for level 1 cards, I just have some fillers in the form of Stomping Ground and Reconstruction. There is also, of course, the lifesteal variant of the Ensnare build, which has Bully at level 5. This will give Buck 50% lifesteal for 2.5 seconds after using Net Shot, and this can definitely provide him a nice boost to his self-sustain. However, you could also just buy the Life Rip item to get a permanent 60% lifesteal bonus, which is why I generally don't tend to use this build as much anymore. It was a lot more fun back in the day when lifesteal was weaker as an item, and also Bully was stronger. But sadly that's not the world we live in. However, I figured I'd show the build anyways just in case you want a nice powerful healing version of this build. This also features Gotcha at level 3, still a really nice card to run, and it has Rapid Sustain at level 1 to just provide a very small boost. You could alternatively, if you want even more healing, take Gotcha down to 1 and put Rapid Sustain up to level 3 just like that. So yeah, there are a lot of builds that you can make with Buck. I have showcased 7 in this video, but you can also tailor the builds to do whatever you really want them to. Don't just consider this video to be the end-all be-all of the possibilities, because there are even more silly ways that you can make a Buck build. For example, if you want to take his mobility to the max, consider a build like this: Stomping Ground 5, Leg Day 4, Gotcha 4, heck yeah, let's just move really fast. So there are a lot of combinations and you can really make a Buck build that suits you, but these are the builds that I enjoy that I end up getting the most value out of. Now let's talk about items. There are a lot of very powerful items for Buck, and which items you pick depend on both your build and the circumstance that you're in. win. First of all, survival options are very important for Buck. Buck is a dive champion through and through, and so he needs to have the tools to get in and actually get the job done without just immediately dying. So items like Haven, Blast Shields, and Veteran are very good depending on the circumstance, and if you're against a lot of crowd control, Unbound is utterly imperative, especially because you are going to be up close and personal with the enemies, and that's when you're most likely to be crowd controlled, so Unbound, Sentinel items like that are especially important. Deft Hands can also be a very nice item to buy on Buck if you are struggling to maintain your ammo during a match. He does have a very long reload, so Deft Hands can really cut down on the time he spends doing that. And also, of course, Nimble is a super powerful item this patch, and so it works really well on Buck just as well as it does on pretty much any other character in the game. It'll help him chase down enemies more effectively, reposition better. It's just a great item. And with Bounce House, Buck is one of the best champions in the game to use the snowball items. Those being items like Lethality, Trigger Scent, and Bloodbath. However, you should be careful when you purchase these because they won't always help you out. You should only purchase these if you're already snowballing the enemies, because if you're just at the start of a match and you don't know how the match is going to go, if you buy Lethality and Trigger Scent and then it turns out you're not able to snowball nearly as well as you want, those items will be basically useless and you would have rather picked something like Haven instead. So be very careful when you're picking these items, but they can be extremely powerful. Finally, let's talk about Rejuvenate. Some people might be wondering, hey, is Rejuvenate a good item on Buck because he has a self-healing ability? And that is a fair question, but I would say the answer to that is generally not. His recovery provides him 1,000 healing exactly, and Rejuvenate will boost that up to 1,300. Certainly that's a nice boost to his healing, but it's generally not worth the opportunity cost of picking another item on Buck. Now, if you're playing a bulk-up based build where you're getting a lot of healing output that way, then Rejuvenate might be worth it, but even still I would say it's generally better to go for something like Veteran or Armor Plating, because you're already usually getting enough healing from your talent as is. If you're able to dip behind a wall and then Cleanse, Cauterize, and then press bulk up, it's basically a full heal, so you don't really need Rejuvenate for that. So Rejuvenate can be funny, but it's not an item I would recommend on this character. Also, if you're playing one of the builds that does not have Stomping Ground in it, Chronos can generally be an okay buy because it'll help you improve the uptime of your abilities. And of course, we can't forget the holy grail of Buck items, Master Feeding! Yeah, Master Riding is a pretty good item on Buck because it allows him to get behind the enemies faster, use the element of surprise to jump the enemies, and get kills. And also, Buck is a character who tends to die a lot because of his super dive-oriented playstyle, and Master Riding will help him get back to the fight faster to make up for the fact that he's spending so much time dead. So it can be a great item on Buck. However, there are times where you definitely want to be prioritizing other items like those survival items I mentioned earlier. Alright, now let's talk about some spicy gameplay tips for Buck. Buck is a character who is all in on the dive. You want to be jumping the enemies using the element of surprise and bursting them down before they even know what happened to them. But this does actually require a bit more finesse than you might think. You can't just be hurling your body at the enemies, expecting them to run away in fear and all just collapse. Buck is a very vulnerable character if he's played improperly, and so you want to use the element of surprise to your advantage, and you want to wait and look for an opportunity to jump someone when they're vulnerable, either when they're not paying attention, or they're weak, or they don't have a movement ability and can't escape you as easily. So examples of these would be a Tyra who is focused on the point and doesn't realize that you're behind her, or an IO player who just used Lunar Leap and so you know she doesn't have a movement ability, although this is a bit sketchy considering that Sacrifice is pretty hard meta right now for the character, and so if you kill her she's probably just going to get a second life, run away, and not give you your cooldown reset. Yeah, that's really awkward. Or of course, if you see someone who is low and running away, you can jump on them, finish them off, and then bounce house away before the enemy team can kill you, or alternatively, snowball into another weak character that you see. Buck is generally all about taking advantage of those people who are out of position, not paying attention, or weak, and you need to keep that in mind when you play the character. And if you don't have the ability to jump on an enemy right away, that is absolutely okay. You should learn to be patient with Buck. He is a monk after all, and so in the meantime, if you don't have the option to dive, you can play in a relatively safe, medium-ranged position where you can still chip away at the enemies and wait for that opportune time to strike. You can also kind of just fill a role in an off lane where possibly a flank might be trying to approach your team, and you can stop them in their tracks. Or you can wait for the enemies to push into you, you, and then you can counterflank them when they're out of position. So there are a lot of options when it comes to Buck, and learning the right time to strike just comes with experience and practicing the character a bunch, but it is important to keep those fundamental tips in mind. Now let's talk about more ability-focused tips. Of course, I've already shown this a little bit earlier, but you can burst someone down by shooting them, jumping, shooting again, net shot, and then pounce on them for the final blow, and if they're still alive at the end of that, you can just shoot them once more. Alternatively, you can slow down a target, shoot them, and then that'll make it easier to land your leap just like that. However, you do want to be careful about leaping against certain people. For example, if I were to leap on this Ying right now, she could teleport away to a position that I don't know where she is, and I could be left stranded in her backline, because if I can't get that kill reset on Ying, then I'm a sitting duck for the next 10 seconds without any way to get out. So you want to make sure that you're looking for opportunities where the enemies don't have their movement abilities to escape. For example, if you just saw that Ying finished her teleport, then would be an opportune time to just jump and crush her skull, just like that. Or you could potentially even bait out a movement ability by walking towards them, generally making your presence known, dealing a little bit of damage to them like that, and then baiting the movement ability out of them. And then after they use their movement ability, that's when you can use your own heroic leap to follow up and finish them. For example, again with the Io example, I could walk at Io, shoot her a little bit just like this, and then when she uses Lunar Leap, I can use my own leap to basically follow her, and boom, get the kill, just like that. Now let's talk about recovery. There is one very big mistake that most people make with recovery, including myself sometimes when I'm in a panic. You should not be doing this. Sitting in front of the enemy, letting them shoot you while you use recovery. That is the incorrect way to use this ability under most situations. And that's because the enemies will just be wailing away at you. You are stuck in this animation. You can't do anything while you're recovering for that full second, except watch the enemies shoot you. You're only delaying your own death, and when Cauterize is ramped up to 90% in the late game, you won't even be healing anymore, because under 90% Cauterize, your recovery will provide you exactly 100 healing over that 1 second. It's simply not worth it to press the ability then. Instead, recovery should be used as a tool in between fights, so you can get a kill on somebody like this. Boom! Bam! Bop! Die, Cassie! Oh, get wrecked, bozo. And then if she did a little bit of damage to you, you can wait for Cauterize to cleanse, use recovery behind a wall, and then top yourself off and be ready to jump on the next enemy. Or another way you can use recovery is if an enemy is chasing you, then you can potentially outmaneuver them, get behind a wall, wait for Cauterize to cleanse, and then use a recovery. And by the time the enemy catches up to you around the corner, you will have a lot more health to engage with them, and you'll be able to jump on them and just murder them like that. So yeah, the recovery is a tool that is meant to be used in between fights, not to face tank damage that the enemies are doing to you. The one possible exception to that is if the enemies are not able to apply Cauterize and you're able to out-heal their damage. For example, the #1 example I can think of is when you are facing off against Imani. If she has not primed you with a Fireball first to apply Cauterize, and then she uses Inferno Cannon on you in a straight 1v1, you can recovery in her face if you choose, because Inferno Cannon will do a lot of damage, but one recovery should usually make it so that you don't die to her. And this is even more prevalent if you're using Bulk Up. If you're playing that talent and you have the 30% damage reduction on recovery, just press recovery and laugh in her face. That is like the one time it's okay to use recovery in the face of an enemy, but most of the time you should just be trying to shoot them instead, and that'll be far more effective, because if the enemy is dead, they can't shoot you anymore, and then you can heal as much as you want. Finally, let's talk about his ultimate. Buck's ultimate is a relatively simple one, and it's not the most impactful ultimate in the game, but it can be helpful for some certain situations. For example, if you run out of ammo, then you can press the ultimate to just get ammo and finish off whoever's fighting you, and then you can snowball that into maybe a second kill like that. Alternatively, you can obviously just use it the intended way, to engage, jump, cast ult, and then just bam, bam, like that. But of course, when you use your ultimate, you are going to be a massive target for the enemy team, because you are loud, you are glowing, you are doing a lot of damage, and yeah, the enemies are just going to turn around and look at you. So you want to make sure that you absolutely have the elements of surprise when you use this ultimate, so that way you can just burst down the enemies before they actually have a chance to deal with you. And like most flanks, Buck is generally the type of champion who wants to play with an off-tank or with a second flank who can dive in with him, because he can take the heat and do big bursts while his off-tank or his other flank helps him finish the job and also helps take a little bit of heat off of him. So if you can play in a group, you will be far far more effective with Buck. However, sometimes that simply isn't possible, and so when you are alone trying to flank as Buck, you want to be even more strategic with who you're targeting, and refer to the tips I gave earlier about targeting the people who are weak. Finally, let's talk about good and bad matchups for Buck, because he is a very heavy matchup-dependent character. If you're looking to play this guy in Ranked, then this is a very important section to pay attention to, because there are some champions that you simply shouldn't play Buck against. Because Buck is so focused on dive, you do not want to play this guy against hard anti-dive characters. For example, if Io is playing Sacrifice, that's a hard anti-dive character. Ray is the bane of Buck's existence. Atlas and Torvald will both kick his teeth in because they'll rewind his leap, they'll nullify him, they'll put a protection on the target he's diving. It is a mess, so generally avoid playing Buck against characters like that. Buck also struggles to deal with flying characters. Bounce House will not work on a character who's too high in the sky, so a character like Drogo's is just unbounceable. You could still play Ensnare versus them, but even then he's limited because ultimately a shotgun just isn't that good of an anti-air weapon unless the flying targets happen to be relatively close to him. So you'll also generally have bad matchups against characters like Drogo's or Androx's. Conversely, Buck really likes to dive characters that don't have that much mobility, and also characters who have squishy heads, because Buck is one of the easiest characters in the game to land headshots with due to the way his shotgun works, and characters that have big head hitboxes are especially vulnerable to Buck. So champions like Pip are really good for Buck to dive, and also champions like Victor and Strix who don't have much mobility and are relatively squishy, they don't have much DR either, those are prime targets for Buck, and Buck will just pretty much farm those characters all day long unless they get a lot of assistance from their team. So if you're in Ranked, you want to avoid picking Buck against his counters, but if you do see very squishy, vulnerable champions on the enemy team, then Buck can be an excellent option to take them down, assuming he also does have a competent team on his side. But if you are in casuals and you're just looking to become a Buck one-trick, then you do need to learn how to counterplay versus these characters, and that is where more reserved, more tactical playstyles like Bulk Up or Ensnare will help you out. Bulk Up, of course, will be very good against characters that are difficult to dive, because it just turns him into more of a bouncer type character who will be very difficult for those champions to deal with because he'll be so hard to kill, and he can basically also just stop the enemies from diving and doing what they want to do by just sitting there, shooting the enemies, and just not dying in the process. Alternatively, if you're up against some flying champions and you still want to do a lot more damage, Ensnare can be a good option, and Ensnare, like I said earlier, can also be a good option for consistent pressure versus tanks. If you have someone like Rom on the enemy team, Bounce House is not the way to go versus Rom, because it'll provide a one-time burst of 600 damage, whereas Ensnare, with the build I showcased earlier, will provide you thousands of extra damage over the course of a fight. Bounce House is fun, and it is by far the most effective way to play Buck when he's allowed to do whatever he wants. But when he's not allowed to do whatever he wants, that's when the other talents come into the picture, so do bear that in mind. But anyways, that's going to do it for today's Buck guide. If you guys found this video to be helpful, then of course make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more guides in the future from me. And also don't forget to check out the Nexus linked in the description if you want to buy crystals to buy any of your favorite Buck skins or any of the latest event passes. Nexus.gg/AndrewChicken. You can buy crystals there and support me directly in the process, officially affiliated with EvoMojo too, so please check it out. But with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.